Trading days, March 19th, 2016. I'm going to take a quick look at the daily chart of the SP 500. Just before we do, today is the spring equinox. This typically happens between the 19th and 21st of March each year, and it's when the sun moves into Aries, or crosses zero point in Aries, and in astrology it's the start of a new year. So happy new year. To the chart, let's look at the we're in the 6th week of the primary cycle. We've had absolutely no pullback. Well, we've had minor pullbacks, nothing substantial, and we could be looking at a turn here shortly, which is what I'm leaning towards. But keep in mind, this could be a half primary cycle we're going into, and are in, which means this could go to the 9-week time frame. So keep that in mind. I'm looking for a turn here, and by the end of the month, and probably next week. Pardon me. So we're in the 6th week. We've put on these Fibonacci grids every week. Let's just take a look at this one in a little more detail. The grid is based on the high here before we started to move down on December 29th, 2015, down to this February 11th low. And that could turn out to be a low of some significance as we look back on this period of time, say 6 months hence. I think that February 11th date is going to be important. January 20th was important too in some other indices. Back to the Fibonacci grid, we've got the S&P 500 virtually stopped at the 88.6% Fib retracement. Now, if you're not familiar with them, the last two here are what we'll call extended Fibonacci numbers. 88.6 is the square root of 78.6, and 78.6 is the square root of 61.8. 61.8 being one of the main numbers. I'm looking at a turn here. It may wait till Wednesday before we see it. We'll talk about that in a minute. Now let's look at one more thing on this chart before we leave it, and that is the last big move up, which started on September 29th through November 3rd, 2015, and we have that on. Yeah, okay. So we got the this line, kind of drawing the 2 points, and if we move that over to the February 11th low, look where that ends up. It's exactly the same number of trading days, 25 trading days, and it's gone up in almost the same angle. So I got this from a couple of other sites had noticed this, so I'll point it out here as well. Another reason why we could turn next week. We certainly turned here, went down sharply, bounced, and then dropped. So I'm looking at next week for a turn. Keep in mind, I've mentioned this a number of times in previous blogs, I'm still watching that 45 calendar day cycle, which if you recall, it's in the notes. It started on May the 20th, and every 45 calendar days from there, we've had a low or a high. So just keep that in mind. That's March 30th. Give it plus or minus at least 2 days. and I'm looking for a low in that time frame as well. Um, that'll be on for subscribers. That's on your list of dates from that last alert. So what's coming up here this week is Jupiter squared Saturn. So this is one of the aspects that we've talked about for quite a few weeks now. Let's just bring up a picture of it quickly. Yeah, okay, that's it. And this was a weekly chart. I'm going to leave it as a weekly, but I'm going to blow it up here a bit so you get a better idea. So the red squares, this was a 3-pass due to retrograde motion. And then the red squares are the Jupiter-Saturn squares. So we had one on right at the beginning of this drop here, back in August 3rd. And the next one is coming up this week. And then the last one in this group of 3 will be May 23rd, that week. This is a very important aspect in the kind of history of astrology. If you think back a couple of, even a century or less, Saturn was the last visible planet. It's all the ancients knew. The 2 outer planets were Jupiter and Saturn. But they have coincided quite well with the business cycle, so we've got to watch these. Jupiter is all about expansion and growth, confidence, hope for the future. It can get overdone. If you want to see a good example of Jupiter, just watch Donald Trump give a speech. And Saturn is really quite the opposite. It's about contraction and loss, fear. On the positive side, we may have perseverance and conservatism. So we've got 2 opposite energies at work here. While I'm looking at this chart, the green squares are the Saturn-Neptune square. So we've got another one coming up in June. This one worries me more. This has a history of epidemics and long lingering diseases. This is of some concern. It gets to exact in June, but its effects really coming on right now. Oh yes, other thing I wanted to mention about the current Jupiter-Saturn square that will be exact on Wednesday, the 23rd. I should say that's the same day as a lunar eclipse. We had the what I thought would be a very strong solar eclipse, and it really didn't amount to too much yet. The lunar eclipse, this may be important for agreements between countries, between large entities. But I think more important that's on the same day, the 23rd. The more important thing on the 23rd, I think, is this Jupiter squared Saturn aspect. The reason why I'm singled out this occurrence when there's 3 is 2 days later we've got this arrow is representing Saturn turning retrograde. So backwards motion. And what that in effect means is a planet doesn't just in effect stop. It doesn't go backwards anyway, but it doesn't effectively stop. it slows down. So when this square is taking place, Jupiter is squaring Saturn. Saturn is moving very, very slowly at that point. It's just 2 days before its stationary retrograde date, which is Friday the 25th. So when a planet slows down like that, their energies are more concentrated and really more powerful. So Saturn may Saturn energies may be more apparent on the 23rd. Again, they're constriction, loss, fear, that type of thing. Okay, that's all I wanted to say on this. Thanks for listening.